right. So one of the topics that people had asked us to talk more about is the real estate investing. So we're gonna make like a little twist, not really get into the real estate investing part of it, but maybe like some of the bad things that go along with it.
Yeah. Unfortunately, bad things do happen. But being in a state like South Carolina, evictions also happen. So that's at least a benefit on our side. But that's me getting to the end before we start the beginning of the story. So
Yeah. So this will be about our first eviction that we saw it all the way through.
yeah,
So now we're pros, we're experts at this. So we'll take you back to the beginning of 2024 because we never really got to tell this story yet, and because there was never really a time to tell it until we knew it was all finalized. So
it was stressful.
yeah, so this is like one of those good ones because everybody on YouTube loves a good story where somebody gets screwed over or something. So if surprise, it was us. So we have a couple long-term rentals, and we had an unfortunate situation where we had a family move into our house.
A family, not our family. You said family.
We had a strange family that we vetted. We did background checks. We did credit checks. We did everything on these people. And they moved into a house that we own. And we gave them keys to the house, and they paid us first month rent, security deposit, all that stuff up front, and moved into the house. They lived in that house for about 2 weeks, and we had that money. After about 2 weeks, we all of a sudden got notified that we got hit with insufficient funds from the person that paid us.
From the security deposit and from first month's rent.
Yeah, so all of a sudden, one morning we woke up and that money was pulled out of our accounts. And they said that they ended up having insufficient funds to cover those payments. And they paid us like an ACH, not like a check that we deposited. So we had to fight with the bank to say, like, well, first of all, how did it get this far, and how did the money hit our accounts and then get pulled out? So we were fighting with all of that and fighting with our tenants because now we're like, hey, man, you guys didn't have enough money, and you paid us, and it got pulled away. And in the beginning, they were very
apologetic.
yeah, they were like, oh my God, we're so embarrassed. We'll fix it. And it got to the point where we were trying to like get them to pay us, and it was just moving so slowly. And we were like, hey, you gotta get this money to us. And we're now passing like month one. So now month two is due.
And you still haven't paid month one.
And you owe us back for month one and security deposit. So now we're a little bit behind. So they said, okay, my dad's just going to pay it on his credit card and just pay it all up front. And so we get caught up and then we could start fresh. Like, great, send the payment. So he pays with his credit card. The money's in our account. Everything's good. It's in there for a couple weeks, right?
Yeah. Yeah, probably about 10 days, same as the first payment.
So then we're like, okay, you're good. The money's in our accounts. We have it. It's in there for 10 days. And then the dad does a fraudulent chargeback with his bank and says, I did not actually approve this. And the money all got pulled back out again. So now the 2 months in security deposit gets pulled out.
I'm going to pause you right there. So now we have 4 transactions, 2 security deposits, 2 rent payments that are pulled out. I use a system called Turbo Tenant. Because all of this happened, they froze my Turbo Tenant account, which is where all of my tenants pay the rent. So now all of the money that all of my tenants have paid for that month was frozen. So now I have all these rent payments just sitting in limbo somewhere. And I have to pay 4 mortgages out of the bank account attached to that.
Yeah, so it started getting stressful. So now we're like, okay, you guys are 2 months behind. And like, you got to pay us. And they're like, all right, she's like, I'll pay you with like Venmo or Cash App. I'll start getting some money over to you, and sent like $300. And I was like, what is this? Like, what is this garbage? You sent $300. You owe us thousands. Like, what is going on? And then it was like the next day would like send 50. And I'm like, oh my God, this is not going well.
$4,500 she was in the hole for. And then another $2,250 on top of that.
Yeah. So basically she was paying pennies, and we're like, this isn't going to work. And so we ended up going down to the county, and we started the eviction process immediately. We're like, listen, you can't, we've given you multiple chances and you haven't gotten us the money.
This is at like the 6 or 8 week point now that she's been in the house for free.
Yep. And so we went to the courthouse. We had to file the eviction process. That takes, let's say, 15 days or so for them to
serve
her and say, here, we're starting the eviction process. And then she can either say that she's not guilty and want a court date, or she can just move out, or she could do nothing. So she did nothing. So then after a certain point, we have to send a certified letter through the county. So we had to go there, pay more money. They send a certified letter.
It's not that much money too, by the way. Like,
No, it's not. But
$50 here, $30 there.
But the courthouse is like 30 minutes from our house.
That's the pain in the butt.
So every time I drive 30 minutes there, spend 30 minutes doing whatever paperwork we got to do, 30 minutes back home. So it's like another hour and a half out of our day. And so then we have to wait for the certified letter thing to come back. We have to keep calling the courthouse like a week later. We're like, did you get the thing back? They're like, yeah, we got it. Then we have to do like some other notice that they have to put on their door. And then finally there's like the final one where they put the notice on your door and you've got to be out like
24
24 hours. Get out. You have 24 hours. But if you choose not to get out, we have to call the police department. They come down to the house and they sit there while we remove the people from the house. We change the locks, and then we have a team, remove all of the furniture and everything, the belongings, and put it out by the curb. And then 24 hours later, I think we can haul the stuff away. But they have 24 hours to pick their stuff up from the curb and take it, something like that. So the 24-hour notice gets posted on the door, and I call the police department. And I was like, hey,
see you tomorrow, right?
Yeah. I was like, they're still there. What do we do? And they're like, we'll call you back and we'll schedule the eviction. And I was like, okay. So now 2 weeks later go by. So remember that date because something changed. But so 2 weeks later goes by and the police department calls us and they're like, are you ready to schedule us to come out there and remove the people? And I was like, well, when could you do that? He's like, probably in the next week or two, we can get you on the schedule. I'm like, dude.
It's been like, we're looking at another month here.
Yeah. So fortunately, what we had done was the court told us, and this is where they kind of messed up, which is, I guess, my own fault because there's no way to prove that they messed up. But the woman told me, here's what you're going to do. They put 24-hour notice on your door. You go there. After 24 hours, you go into the house and check if they're gone. If they're gone, great. You have your house back. If they're not gone, you have to call the police and they come out and remove them. In my head, I thought that sounded wrong because I said, so I'm just supposed to go to this house after 24 hours and just go in and see if they're there? I said, what if there's 25 of them there? And, like, what if they're armed and all of a sudden they don't like somebody walking into their house? I said, you're setting me up for like failure big time. And she's like, well, that's the way it's done. So when the police called me and said, hey, we got to get you on scheduled and we'll do the removal. I said, listen, I already went there. They were out of the house. So I changed the locks. And he's like, ooh, you changed the locks. That's a terrible thing. And I was like, yeah, but we already put the 24-hour notice on. They had to be out in 24 hours. The eviction's over at this point. It was done and over with. And he's like, yeah, once we change the locks, we can't come out there. And I was like, okay, well, that's not helpful. And they said, whoever told you that in the courthouse was wrong. Like, who told you that? I was like, I don't know, some brown-haired woman that was probably 55 years old or something, whatever. So anyway, he's like, she was wrong. And I don't think she actually told you that. I was like, she did. I wouldn't make this stuff up. So anyway, well, let's go back to the day when we went there. Because I wanted that house back. I was like, I don't care. I'm going there and I'm taking my house back.
We had a renter lined up, remember?
Yeah,
we had a renter lined up.
Yeah, we had somebody that was ready to rent the house. So I said, okay, well, I'm gonna take my house back. If it was any of you out there, you probably feel the same way. It's my house. These people stole it for a couple months. They never paid us $1. So for 3 or 4 months, they stole my house and lived there fraudulently. That's, in my head, that's illegal.
That's theft.
So I do what I did best. I called my friends and I said, hey, let's get some guns and let's go over there and let's see if they're there. So we showed up armed and everything, ready to go. Kicked that front door in. Well, we just opened it.
They opened it with the key.
Yeah. Turns out it wasn't even locked to begin with. But so when the door opens, the first thing I noticed was the smell. So they only lived there for what, 3 months?
It was under 3 months.
Okay, so under 3 months. This house was beautiful when they moved in. It was clean, hardwood floors. It was a beautiful house. 3-bedroom, 2-bath.
Freshly painted.
It was a beautiful little house. And so when I made the mistake and said, they've been there for 3 months and we got them evicted. Like, thank God this finally is over. How bad could it be in 3 months? I didn't know how bad somebody can destroy a home in 3 months.
That's like when you go out and you're like, I'm not going to drink that much tonight. Like, This moment was terrible.
And I don't just mean like damage it, like put holes in walls. Like that's not what I mean.
I wish there was a hole in a wall. It's easy to patch a hole in a wall.
Yeah, I think I put a hole in the wall with how mad I was. So we opened the door, and the smell was so ungodly bad. Like it was so bad. And when I say bad, like not just like unpleasant, it was so bad and unhealthy that I literally had to take my shirt and put it over my face and try to breathe. Like it was unhealthy.
It was a hazmat situation.
Yeah, like it was a toxic level bad. And now, just so you know what lived in this, it was supposed to be a woman, and there was 4 children,
Yeah.
and that was it, and no animals. So when we opened the door, I started to walk in, and all of a sudden, like I'm looking at this absolute disgustingness that I see in front of me. I smell it, and now all of a sudden, like now my emotions get involved. So I'm just not really thinking. And as I go to step into the house, the next guy, Anthony, who was on our podcast once before, who's a New York City firefighter and badass, he was standing right behind me. He's like, "Hey, watch where you step," and they kind of grabbed me, and I like look, and I was like, "What am I looking at?" Like it was just so much stuff going on in my mind, and I like looked down, and there was dog poop in the room, and he's like, "Careful, like don't step in that. That's dog poop." And I was like, "They weren't supposed to have dogs here," and
They were not.
so then I looked like past it, and I'm like looking all over the floor, and there's dog poop everywhere. And I was like, "Oh my god!"
And urine.
Yeah, lots of urine. And I see like a bunch of dog bowls laid out in the house, like filled with food, like a lot of food. Like, so in my head, I'm like, okay, well, I think they left a dog in this house and left a lot of food so it couldn't survive for a couple of days. And it smelled as if the dog had died. I was like, it smelled like pure death in that house, in a house.
And we love animals, so emotions are running wild right now.
So I said, I noticed all the dog bowls filled, packed with food. So I said to him when we walked in, I was like, hey man, like I don't know, it could be like pit bulls or anything in here. Like, if a dog comes out and it's angry and, I was like, don't be afraid to just shoot it and put it down. But, so we go into the house and it was, there was like, they were there for 3 months, and for 3 months, they pretty much just put trash in bags and then left the bags. There was, babies in the house because they would change the diapers, and then they would just ball up the diaper and throw it on the floor. Like not in a bag or anything, just throw them on the floor. So there's just dirty diapers all over the house. There was like wigs, like women's wigs, on the house, on the floor.
Lashes,
on the
nails.
same floor that was covered in dog pee and poop. So the house was just, and then there was flies like everywhere. Like just looking, there was like the little tiny like fruit flies everywhere, and like actual big black flies like everywhere, just flying all over the place. There was like maggots on the floor. I don't even know how all this stuff happened in 3 months. And it was just so and the smell was so bad that we were just, and the battery was dead in the smoke alarm. So you just hear that random chirp every 30 seconds, which is so fitting for the whole situation. So we walked through the house, and every bedroom was just absolutely disgusting. We get to the door, when we're inside the house, we get to the door that opens and takes you into the garage. And now it was a summertime, right? This was in the summer.
Yeah, this was July.
So it's July. No like AC or heat in the house. They also didn't pay their water bill or their electric bill, which is going to be important in the story.
Actually, this is June, end of June. This is right before I got my life coaching cert.
So when we get into the house, like even in the showers, they had the little like battery operated lights that you'd stick on the wall, and you can like touch them and it turns on.
Like the electric was off.
Yeah, because the electric was off, the water was off. So they had to just put battery operated lights so they could see when they were in the house. And I'm assuming they were just taking cold showers until the water ran out. And so we get to the door that opens into the garage. So when we opened that door, it was so hot in that garage.
It was so bad.
There was a bed, a king size bed, and a box spring and a mattress, like no sheets or anything on it, just the mattress.
A carpet, right?
Yeah, like some little area carpet that was under the bed. But the mattress itself was covered in dog poop all over the floor. And so there must have been somebody that, I don't know if they subletted the garage out to somebody, but there was like somebody that lived in the garage, which had no ventilation and no air. And it was probably 100 degrees in the garage. And a dog, because the dog actually chewed through the molding by the door and the drywall. Like the dog was trying to escape the garage to get into the house. So I'm guessing there was multiple dogs in this house.
It was so like you saw like the trim around the door, and it just made you cry. Not because it was destroyed, but just thinking about the poor animal that was locked in there.
Yeah, that dog had to just been left in the garage. I mean, the amount of dog
inhumane.
feces was
Yeah.
insane.
The smell, it's like a smell that I think if I smell that again, I'll just start to cry.
And I'm describing it as if we got kind of like just took our time and looked around at everything. We were probably in that house for a matter of 2 minutes. Like it was like one of those things where we were like, okay, we got to get out of this house. Like it's not safe to be in here. It's so disgusting. You also didn't want to breathe because there's so many like flies in the air that you felt like you were literally gonna like they were gonna go in your mouth. And so now like we get out of the house and have to figure out like what do we do now? So at one point during all this, we called the police and said, hey, like, is there any way we can get a police report for like vandalism, criminal mischief? Like these people like deceived us. They stole from us, destroyed a house. And they were like, immediately they cut me off. Like, no, we don't come out there for landlord tenant issues. And I was like, but it's not just a money issue. Like they destroyed a house. And they're like, it was a business transaction, take them to court. And I was like, so can I even get any type of report or like documentation? They're like, nope. And I was like, so you won't even come out to the house? Like while I was on the phone with him. And he's like, nope. And I was like, oh, okay. So we'll just handle it ourselves. So the next thing is your insurance, at least around here, is your insurance doesn't cover damages by a tenant. So you have to take them to court for all of that stuff. So if they cause, thousands of dollars of damage in your house, you fix it yourself and then fight them for the money back. I would recommend physically fighting them because it's easier and you get the aggression out. So at this point, we have to pay to fix everything. This house is absolutely garbage. So we called like one of those restoration companies like Serve Pro and Restoration One, like all those types of companies.
We needed a hazmat company to come in. It was so bad.
Yeah. And they obviously show up there with like dollar signs in their eyes. They're like, we love this. They're like, we're going through insurance, right? And I was like, no, we're not. I'm paying for this out of pocket. So slow your roll. So the guys were like, okay. So we finally figured out a price to be able to have them show up, remove all of the waste and garbage.
And clean.
And then go in there and clean and disinfect. And like when they're done, they make the house beautiful again. So like, okay. They're like, we can get you in like a couple days. Because I was like, there's no like, heat or air running at this point. There's no electric, no water. So we had to have all that stuff turned back on. So anyway, we do all that and they schedule a date to come out there. When they show up, I meet them at like 9 a.m. so they can start cleaning. After the water had been turned back on by the water company, for whatever reason, a pipe burst by my washing machine. The pipe that connects to my washing machine. That pipe burst and proceeded to flood my entire house. And because nobody lived there,
it was a couple days.
We didn't know that this had happened. So when I show up to let them in, I walk up to the front door and there's like water like all over the porch, and it hadn't rained in a while. It's hot in Myrtle Beach.
Summer.
Yeah, and so I was like, there's a lot of water like right by the front of the door, and like the front mat when I stepped on that was soaking wet, and there was like you could see under the door was wet, and I was like, what?
And there's an awning, so the mat shouldn't have been wet.
Yeah, and I was like, why is everything soaking wet? And so I opened the door, and I'm telling you, every time you open that door, it was absolutely disgusting. So, like those guys put on like hazmat suits, like they were in the
head to toe.
Yeah, they had like rebreather masks and everything, and like they were all suited up. And here I am in like jeans and a t-shirt and flip flops. So I opened the door, and the whole like living room was flooded, like water everywhere. And I was like, oh my god! So I just ran in to find out like where water's coming from, and then I could hear the water like just pissing from the like back behind the washing machine in the wall. So I'm like, oh my god! So we finally get the water shut off, so it stops that. So I said to these guys, I was like, you guys were all here to clean, but now we got a new problem on our hands. Like the house is flooded. So they were like, well, now the problem is the urine and feces that were on the floor now is wet and goes under the flooring. So now you have like I don't know, they're like, we have stage 3 decontamination now. It was like the guy, I was like watching like the movie E.T. when they all come in the white. So they're like, floor's got to come out. They're like yelling orders.
They're
and they
like,
just start
rip
working.
the drywall.
Yeah, they're like first 4 feet of drywall and the whole house has to get ripped out. Floors get ripped out. And I was like, oh my God. I was like, this is getting so bad. So I'm like, okay, so now I'm in my head, I'm just like, like cash register. I'm like, oh my God, ching, 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 ching. But in a bad way of like how much money we're going to start spending of like spend. So I was like, oh God, this is going to like bankrupt us. I was like, I will never financially recover from this. But then I was like, well, wait a minute. Like, I know my insurance doesn't cover renter damage.
Let's go. So I'm not there. I got my life coach certification that weekend. So Chris goes over there by himself to just let these guys in. He's supposed to come right back home. I'm sitting down ready to start my online class, and he calls me and he's like, this is what's going on. So I immediately go and I pull out our policy, and I find out, I get him the information for the insurance company, phone number, call our insurance agent. We have renters, some kind of like rental thing where like we get paid for like lost rent. We have some kind of flood insurance that covers burst pipes. I was like, oh my God, we might be okay.
Yeah, so basically it's just a flood in the house. So I had to call the insurance company, and you don't get a lot of coverage for a couple things. Like, at least in my policy, you don't get a lot of coverage if it's a slow leak. So if, say, you have like a slow leak under your kitchen sink and it just drips periodically, and then the bottom of that cabinet starts to get warped, or maybe the floor eventually starts to warp because you have a slow leak that you're not paying attention to, like, that's not really covered, or it's covered at a very small amount. If your toilet overflows, like say you flush the toilet and it comes back up and overflows everywhere, like that's only covered up to like $500. So there's all these little things you got to pay attention to. But a sudden pipe burst is covered up to like $300,000. So I was like, perfect. I just had a sudden pipe burst. So I said to the guys, I was like, listen, this is now probably going to be an insurance claim, but regardless, we got to get this house fixed. So just, you were here to start cleaning. I said, now just
document everything,
clean it better. And so they, they got rid of all the garbage, and then they ripped out all of the floors in the whole house, which I was like, oh my God, like I couldn't believe it was happening. They're running all these machines to dry the house out, like doing all this stuff. And I will say they did get the house pretty quickly in a couple days to be like, when you'd walk in there, it was still like humid from all the water, but you were like, okay, it's starting to smell a little bit better.
Walls were dry.
Yeah.
Like they did dry everything out.
And they ran like the ozone machines, and all the stuff they ran started killing all the bugs. So all the flies all of a sudden started dying off. And so it started to quickly get recovered. But I called the insurance company. I explained to them, I was like, listen, it's, and I also had our policy like loss of use because it was an investment property. So we had rent coverage for the time that it was not able to be rented. So the one thing the insurance woman did, who was absolutely horrible, was took one full day to respond to one email. And most of the time her responses were horrible. So I could ask her all these questions in an email, and I'd have to wait until the very next day, 24 hours later, for her to write me an email. And I'd quickly respond back to it and be like, oh, it's 2:00. She still has a couple hours at work. Respond right back. I wouldn't get a response until 2 p.m. the next day. So this kept happening. And so this whole time I'm like, I have no rent. It's taken, weeks and months now at this point to get the house fixed. And towards the end, when things finally started, so we had, I think, what was the estimates? We had like $30,000 in damage when it was all done. I think one of the estimates was like $40,000 to rebuild and to do all of everything.
Don't use a restoration company.
Yeah, that restoration company. Once they knew insurance was involved, oh my God, the prices were astronomical.
And the insurance company was like, this is not realistic. We're not doing it.
Yeah.
So we were looking like, oh my God, we're getting screwed on top of it.
The restoration company submitted a bill at first for like $40,000, and the insurance company's like, we'll give you $15,000. I was like, how can you give me $15,000 when they say there's $40,000 in damage?
And how are you so far off?
Yeah. So eventually we started figuring it out, and they started bringing up on prices, and we started getting prices down from the other companies. It was like this long battle. But towards the end, I said to the woman, I also need to submit for all my lost rent. And she's like, what do you mean lost rent? And I was like, I explained to you in like emails. I said, this is a rental house. I said, every month I'm not getting rent. And I said, and I told her, I was like, you respond to one email a day. I said, how long do you think this process? We could have had a bunch of emails in one day and made this a lot quicker. I said, you're the one costing your company a lot of money because of how slow you are. I said, at this point, I don't care because I'm going to get paid by the insurance company for all the lost rent. I said, so, I mean, it's not like I'm winning and making money. That money's just going to go pay the mortgage. But I said, the longer you take, the more money you have to pay me for lost rent. And watch how fast she started responding to emails.
The process was done within a week.
Yeah, she's
after
like, okay,
that.
we're going to close your claim real quick then. And they finally sent the checks and did everything. But once she realized that she was the reason for having to write a big rent check, she quickly started working a lot harder.
Yeah, we had a few months of rent.
Yeah, so once this house was done and rebuilt, it took, and this was months, and this was me working like every day on this project. Now the house, it's re-rented. It has brand new paint throughout the whole house, new drywall, new molding, new flooring, new vinyl floor throughout the whole house.
It looks beautiful again.
I mean, when we were done with it, this house had all new molding everywhere. Like this house was like completely rebuilt.
Did we ever get Anthony back in there to see it? I know we wanted to.
No, I think we took video of it when it was done.
Yeah.
But yeah, it was a little bit of a nightmare.
Yeah. And now our tenants, I mean, knock on wood, they seem wonderful. I hope they are.
Yeah.
You know, you always hope.
So yeah, so that's our story of the first time a house got destroyed for us. So a lot of people were like, "Oh, you have all these houses and renters, and you probably make so much money." And I was like, "No."
No, but I might shock you with this one. Is people are like, "Oh, I want to get into it. And I want to get like, let me just try with like one house." If I can give you any advice, do not buy one house. I mean, if you can only buy one in the beginning, but aim for another and another, because while we had one house down, so we have four properties in one LLC. So the way it worked out, the other three properties floated the one that wasn't collecting rent. So we didn't actually come out of pocket for much of anything the way it all worked out. We actually ended up pretty okay. Nothing came out of our personal account. We were great. So if I can give you any advice, it's definitely have multiple properties, because in a situation like this, you're going to have to come out of pocket. Like rent still got to get, or mortgage really still has to get paid. Utilities are still going to have to get paid. But if you have multiple houses, now you have other houses floating the other properties. In a perfect world, I mean, in our situation, it worked out really well. And I kept saying, thank God I have 3 other houses and all of them are rented, and they're still rented by the same people. And I really love our tenants. Like people complain about tenants all the time. Like, oh, I can't believe you're buying a house and renting it out in our development. Our tenants are amazing. So, I mean, if anybody's watching, thank you for being amazing tenants. But buy multiple houses, guys, because they float each other. That's my big advice.
Yeah. So if there's anything that you guys, if you've ever experienced this, if you own a home and rent it out, and you have a story like that, share it down below, because I'm sure people would like to hear about it. And,
but the eviction process.
The eviction process was really quick in South
45
Carolina.
days. 45 days. And by the time we turned the key, now remember, we didn't wait for the police, but by the time we entered that house, Chris and Anthony that day, 45 days went by. Exactly.
Yep. And if you're gonna buy a house and want to rent it, pay attention to what state you buy it in and what the eviction process is, because there's places where they get squatters or people that don't want to pay rent, especially during COVID times, and you were able to live in houses for like 2-3 years without paying any rent.
Yeah, South Carolina didn't do the COVID thing.
Nothing would happen. And if you were a landlord and you were like, you know what, that's enough, I'm going to take my house back, you go to jail. So, you know, there's nothing you can really do. So pay attention to where you buy a house. I think that's more important than the market. But actually, the markets are actually pretty good in the states that are landlord friendly. So,
Yeah, also true.
So that's pretty much it. Anything you want to add before we go?
No, I mean, that was it. I mean, the other thing is too, you were mentioning how emotional it was. The reason the situation was so emotional when he walked in there was there was a mom, 2 teenagers, a toddler, and a 6-month-old living in that house. So those babies, like those poor babies.
Yeah,
Like
they're growing up in
that's why the
bad
situation
situations.
was like, even like, forget the damage. Damage, like obviously it can be fixed over time. But thinking about like those kids don't have a chance in hell at this world. That's emotional and that sucks.
Yeah.
But I mean, had we known sooner, or had we talked to the neighbors, we didn't even think to talk to the neighbors. Had we talked to the neighbors sooner and realized what was happening while they were still there, we could have called the police and had this handled in real time. It wouldn't have been a tenant issue at that point. It would have been a like a DIFUS type issue, family services, humane society, stuff like that. But now we know. We won't make that mistake again. But I think that's it. I think that's all I got to add.
Yep. So we'll get another video out pretty soon. But if there's anything, comment down below. Let us know what you want to hear next, or any other topics that you guys want to know about. So that's it. And we'll catch you guys next time.
Yeah. See you later, guys.
Peace out.